You are listening to Armchair Healthcare, a podcast on pills, placebos, and policy.
All right, welcome to Armchair Healthcare. How you doing, Max?
I'm pretty good. It's been a bit of a busy week.
Yes, it has.
We could talk about a few things, but I think we could start with how we started the week, which was with the Ovid Therapeutics data,
Yes.
which is gaboxidol for Angelman syndrome.
Let's slow down for a second here, Max. So they don't call it gaboxidol. They've rebranded this as their own little drug, right?
Oh, yeah, OV101.
Yes, I love it when companies do that, when they take something that's been around for 30 years and they...
Longer. Yes, it was first discovered in 1977.
1977?
Yes.
Gosh, when I looked back on this, I saw stuff in the 80s, but...
Well, no, that's when they actually were running the clinical studies. They began in the early 80s. So it was discovered in 1977, which is, of course, the year that Star Wars came out.
Oh, that puts it in perspective.
Yeah.
And so this is actually, it comes from mushrooms. So this is actually something, I think, going back to the good old days of drug discovery when you could just find drugs out there in the world, and the bark of trees and mushrooms, that sort of thing. And
and they found something that hits the GABA receptor, which, is just generally not hit by anything like, Ambien or barbiturates or quite a lot of things.
To be fair, Max, there's lots of GABA receptors, right? And all these different GABA drugs always love to differentiate themselves based on the different subsets of GABA receptors they hit. This one hits the extrasynaptic GABA receptors. I think that's delta.
And how's that worked out for it since 1977?
It's failed every clinical trial it's ever been in.
Yeah, and it's not like it was just sitting on a shelf. I mean, Merck and I think Lundbeck were actively running trials with this drug until Jeremy Levin of Teva Pharmaceutical fame decided to join this company. And I don't even understand, what's the point, man? Why would you?
Well, I think we all liked Jeremy Levin too, right? It seemed unfair when he got fired from Teva.
Well, yeah, it was. I mean, he had to deal with a very insane board of directors over there, full of like tech executives and other people like that. They ran that company in the ground. But anyway, why would someone from kind of a world-class company go to this little biotech that's developing a drug that's been around for literally 41 years?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't really understand it either. I mean, it's not like the guy was toxic. Everyone, I think, was on the same side. He had lots of friends in the business. I don't really understand this whole trajectory of his.
I mean, he could have easily been like the CEO of some unicorn with a $5 billion valuation in preclinical studies, or at least a $2 billion.
Well, maybe he could become CEO of Valiant.
Wow. No one wants to buy that headache.
But you get paid until you do.
Well, yeah, that's how they got Joe Papa.
Big Papa.
So besides the fact that, he came to this company with this really old drug that's failed in everything. So they came out with data. They hit an endpoint.
Yes.
At one dose.
And what was the endpoint?
The physician-rated clinical global impressions of improvement. So it's just a physician questionnaire. If you look on clinicaltrials.gov, they had 17. So the primary endpoint was actually safety and tolerability. Secondary endpoints, they had 17 of them. This was listed number 16 of those 17. But in the press release, it talks about how in the statistical plan, this was somehow, there was like a hierarchy and this was the top endpoint. Which, okay, maybe it's true, maybe it's not, but it seems kind of weird that, first of all, they would list it so low in the clinicaltrials.gov entry. Also, they wrote a paper on endpoints, proper endpoints for Angelman syndrome, and they didn't include this as one of the endpoints they were researching. Yeah,
so this endpoint is, you see it on a lot of studies, but you hardly ever even hear it reported, because it's maybe useful to see if it's making doctors happy, but it's not useful for approval or anything else like that. And I will see they did reveal something. They didn't want to talk about any of the other endpoints, but based on their statistical plan, where they're going to sort of test this first and see if this thing works and then sort of move on from there with the rest of their statistical tests. The fact that they didn't report anything else means that this one worked and everything else failed, or at least the next one on the list failed, whatever that was.
Yeah, they claimed the next one on the list failed, and so based on their statistical plan, they weren't allowed to look at the others because it would have been kind of like data mining.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I mean, that's a sort of way to unbias yourself a little bit, I guess. I mean, the thing is, they looked at the rest of those. They had the data. And they probably would have come out with something like, well, we threw the statistical plan in the garbage, but we just got all these good datas.
You know, even in this endpoint that they supposedly, or they say they hit, so the lower dose, which was 15 milligrams once a day, that hit significance. But then the higher dose, which was 10 or 15 milligrams twice a day, missed significance by really a large amount. It was a p-value of 0.3446.
Yeah,
and then they tried to pool the data to make it like the whole trial was significant, which, you know, it worked. But you had like one dose work and then one completely not work, even though it was the higher dose.
Yeah, it's always discouraging to see an inverse dose response. But I will say, just to caveat all this stuff, that does happen sometimes. It loves to happen with biologics for various reasons. And there's quite a few instances of that in the sort of neuropsychiatric space, which you could kind of consider this neuropsychiatric space. Because people's brains adapt, and they adapt in all sorts of different ways. And if you treat them with a drug, then maybe it'll become less effective. And if you treat them with more drug, it'll become less effective more quickly. So that is a thing, but I don't get the feeling that's what's going on here. I get the feeling that probably nothing is happening.
Yes. I mean, I think it definitely looks that way. Some people are giving the company benefit of the doubt just because it's Jeremy Levin and he has a big name. But like all the signs point towards this not doing much and this probably being worthless.
One other detail that kind of points to that to me is they looked at safety in this trial. And one of the things where there's a difference in safety was in seizure rates. Now, keep in mind that Angelman syndrome is characterized by seizures. Like these kids have seizures. It sucks. So you would probably expect to see some seizures on these studies. But what they saw no seizures in the placebo arm, but they did see seizures in the drug arms. And which you could just chalk up to chance, except the fact that this is a GABA. And that's one of the main things that GABAs do. The main reason why GABA agonists are used in the clinic is because they prevent seizures.
Yes.
So you would really hope that the kids would have fewer seizures when treated with this. And so what this points to me is even if, and I think the scientists, I haven't dug into this too much, but I think the scientists are pretty sure that this drug really is hitting that extrasynaptic GABA receptor. But there's a chance that receptor is not super important. That's the other thing people don't like to talk about. They think drugs sometimes just don't work, but sometimes your whole premise is flawed, as might be the case here.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the seizures, so there were no seizures in the placebo arm at all, but in the lower dose, it was really, it's just 2 people, but it was 6.9% of that arm, and then 10.3% in the higher dose arm. So the more of this GABA drug that these people got, the more seizures they got.
That's not good.
Yeah.
And I will also point out that these extrasynaptic GABA receptors, there's another company out there who's highly premised on activity against these receptors. Do you know which one it is?
Is it Sage?
It is Sage. I'll just stick that in your pipe and smoke it. So their main drug too, also a lot of the sort of discussions of why it's different than, say, a benzo is focused on the fact that it hits these extrasynaptic GABA receptors. So maybe the story here is that Ovid shouldn't have gone after Angelman and should have gone after postpartum depression.
Through a 60-hour infusion?
Yeah, if it works.
Yeah.
You're already depressed, Max.
What?
The 60 hours is nothing. You're already laying in bed.
Well, no, but a 60-hour infusion is pretty severe.
And to be clear, we're talking about Sage's drug for postpartum depression, allopregnanolone. It takes 60 hours of continuous infusion for it to work.
And I've spoken to a KOL about this, and they were just saying that it's really hard for them to get these severe postpartum depression suffers to even take a Zoloft.
Mm-hmm.
So getting them, first of all, 60 hours is generally away from your child. Look, it may very well work, but I don't know how much of a market that is.
Yeah, I don't know either. But, maybe it works. It's a very interesting premise and everything else like that. One of the things that characterizes postpartum depression is that you basically, once the baby is born, your seizure threshold, it goes up, and you become resistant to benzodiazepines, which does suggest there is a sort of a central role here for those GABA receptors and everything else like that. So it seems to be on target, which is more than I can say for Ovid.
Yeah. Anyway, speaking of companies that are doing things that you kind of can't explain sometimes, Ampio Pharmaceuticals. This is a company that had previously been developing tramadol, which is a kind of a weak opiate for premature ejaculation in phase 3. Yeah, exactly. It's like, well, we'll give you an opiate, so then, yeah.
I thought, well, I mean, maybe.
Yeah. So
maybe. If you're just all blissed out, then the extra bliss...
I think it was more like a desensitization strategy.
Oh, so you can't even feel what's going on.
Yeah, so it helps you not... Well, it didn't work.
Okay.
So, but that was their
seems like
theory.
a really low bar to be giving people. I mean, I know some docs love tramadol because it's an opiate, but it's not scheduled. But I'm convinced that tramadol is an opiate and not scheduled because the side effects are just so bad. Because there's a severe hangover effect with tramadol.
Is it?
Yes, there's a really, really severe hangover effect. It's a strange drug. It's got all sorts of weird antidepressive effects, too. And it hits, like, your kappas and...
It's kind of just a dirty drug that hits a lot of things.
It hits a lot of stuff.
But it's not necessarily a powerful pain suppressant. So, anyway, they were developing that. So now they're developing this albumin which is kind of a blood-derived product.
Albumin is, like... It's serum. It's like the main stuff in serum. Like it's the most prevalent protein in the human body.
Yes.
Anyone that's worked in a lab has worked with tons of this stuff because they get it from cows. And you just have this stuff by the pound in the lab. But yeah, people have a lot of albumin in their bodies.
Yeah, so they're injecting even more albumin into people's knees, people with osteoarthritis of the knee.
So this is kind of like, the sort of serum injections for the knee, but without all the things that make serum injections for osteoarthritis work.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
So, needless to say, it's had a kind of a rough road in the past.
Mm-hmm.
It generally has not been able to show that it's better than saline injections, which is usually the placebo arm.
Mm-hmm.
So the company, they ran a trial and they said it was positive. So they did have a saline arm, but they didn't really report that data. They were comparing their arm versus historical saline controls.
Okay.
And they're trying to get approval on that. So they had a call the other day where they announced that the FDA has pushed back on that as an approvable endpoint, and they might not be able to file on it.
Mm-hmm.
Shocking. But if anybody ever wants to have like some levity during earnings season, listen to an Ampio conference call. I mean, it is really just ridiculous. I mean, you talk to this shyster talking on the call, the CEO, about, first of all, he was saying the FDA didn't know what they were doing. That
the FDA never heard of osteoarthritis or something?
Oh, yeah. The people they were meeting with weren't even osteoarthritis experts, and they didn't know their drug or what they were trying to do. And so that's why they've been so difficult. But look, if you look at the history of this drug, and the company, somehow they think this is a good slide. So they show numerous trials that they've run for this, including a total of 5 phase 3s. And I think they had like one of them positive, and the other one they used that saline historical controls, and the rest I believe are negative.
And what's the endpoint here? Is it WOMAC?
Yeah, it's generally WOMAC. I think for one of them it was not WOMAC.
Well, I will say there's several things to keep in mind here, which is that saline works pretty well for this. I mean, comparatively well to other things, because and I don't know why. Doing nothing works pretty well by WOMAC criteria, because people just need to be told that they're doing something, and all of a sudden your knee feels better. And also, nothing has ever been approved on actually hitting statistical significance on WOMAC. Only things that have been approved by hitting subsets of the WOMAC criteria. So, like WOMAC C or B. Or
well, these were all actually WOMAC A.
Or is A the one? Okay.
Yeah.
So this is just WOMAC A. So they didn't even want to compare their drug based on the reduced criteria to saline.
No, they don't really want to do that. I mean, look, if the FDA tells you something, first of all, you just got to do it. There's no real arguing about endpoints. I mean, it's really hard. The easiest path is always just to do what the FDA wants.
Generally, yes.
Yeah, and right now they're claiming to be in negotiations with the FDA, but I can't imagine how they're going. The FDA is probably like, no, I mean, we told you need to do another trial, and you don't want to do another trial, but there's nothing really to talk about then.
So these guys can spin this for, another 10 months. Like, oh, well, we think we can have enough to go forward. And they go forward with it, fill out the application, keep investors on board for a few more months.
Well, they were able to raise money off of this news, so which I thought was hysterical. At first, I thought it was a joke when I saw that they raised money, because the stock was down literally 80%.
Mm-hmm.
And then right after it was down 80%, they decided to raise money at a 33% discount to that closing price with 100% warrant coverage, with the warrants at the money, which basically means they have no faith in what they were actually saying was true, that they would be able to file on this. Otherwise, they would have waited and not raised the money on a horrific down day. I mean, usually companies do the exact opposite, which is raise it on the uptick. They thought the
stock would go the opposite direction, Max.
No, but they could have stopped the deal. They did the deal after they saw that it was collapsing, and they were like, well, okay, yeah, we were trading almost at $3, but let's raise money at 40 cents with 100% warrant coverage with at the money warrants. Yeah. I mean, that means they just wanted the money to pay their own salaries. And
keep this thing going for like another year, just waiting for approval.
Yeah, and look, the guys who gave him money, they'll probably make money on this. I'm sure just a month ago, the stock was up like 12% in a day because, at a $250 million valuation, so it was a lot, on M&A rumors. All it takes is like a little rumor here or there on stock twits or whatever, and, the stock will be above their 40-cent strike price for the warrants, and the investors will make money. They'll be happy, but the people who gave them money on this deal will be happy. But
what you can do is you can just sell that share, right? Keep the warrants, because that's your upside coverage on the short that you're going to initiate.
Yes, that is also a strategy that you can do.
That's one I like.
But in this case, I think like just the way these things go, they usually will, they'll have money. They're not going to go bankrupt. So it's not going to be like that kind of death spiral, but they'll spike. There's
definitely a class of investor out there that will see this and say, they've already applied to the FDA and look at the valuation. The upside here is huge.
Oh, yeah.
If they get approval.
Well, just to give you a sense, though, of the type of investor who gets involved with this, so someone posted that, I believe this was a bag holder quote on Twitter. One of my favorite accounts. It's really funny. So they said, the stock was down 78% yesterday, and now it's down 24% this morning. That's over 100%. If you're thinking about that, you need to retake your math classes.
Yes. Oh, that reminds me of one of my favorite stock quotes, and then somebody famous said it, but I don't know who it was. I can't remember off the top of my head. But it was, do you know how a stock falls 90%, Max? It falls 50%. And then it falls 80% more. So there's always more downside.
Yes. Yeah. Speaking of a little downside, just I know we mention Tesla every time, but there was kind of major news this week. And
I'm going to add Tesla to the list of banned topics, Max.
Fine. Can we talk about it?
We can talk about Tesla. I know you love to talk about Tesla.
I do, and it's like it was kind of big news. I mean, Elon Musk did say that he's considering taking the company private, and funding is secured. Very definitive statement.
That is very definitive statement.
Yeah, so of course the stock reacted very positively, and went up from, I think it was like from like 340 to like 388 or something like that. Because he also mentioned that he was going to take it private at $420 a share, which was very important. So he makes this announcement, but if you do the math, this would be by far the largest leveraged buyout ever for private equity. So this isn't just like one investor that can do this. He needs a whole consortium of them. He needs Goldman Sachs in there, SoftBank, some sovereign wealth funds, all that stuff, chipping in billions, all agreeing on this price. And CNBC went around and asked all of these people. None of them know anything about this. And then, the board, or certain members of the board, basically the non-Elon Musk relatives of the board, sent out a statement saying, he mentioned taking Tesla private last week. We've been meeting on this several times since then. We're considering all options, which is
kind of different than the funding is secured.
Yes, very different. And so the SEC apparently is now investigating Tesla because of the statement, because it was a clear violation of one of their rules. You can't just make up stuff to make your stock go up and just disseminate it publicly. So it's just it's just really funny. And I mean, there was one theory that he just really wanted the stock to be above 360 because Tesla owes convertible debt with a $360 strike price. So if it's above that price, all he has to do is issue more shares to those holders. If it's below that price, he has to pay them in cash, and they don't have that much cash.
And when do those guys do?
I believe it's in March, but he has to have the funding secured by December.
Wait.
Yeah.
This is going to be a fun year.
Dude, I can't wait for the Netflix series to come out on this one. I mean, it will be just amazing. I mean, a movie will not do
So you want a dramatic interpretation of this?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, who's going to play Elon?
I've said I think Shia LaBeouf would be perfect.
Oh, Shia LaBeouf. He has the right personality.
He does, doesn't he?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, Shia LaBeouf, and then Amber Heard can play Amber Heard.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So it will be a fun movie or a series.
You can't fit it into a movie.
There's no way. There's just so much. I mean, the whole SpaceX and saying there was, I believe he said there was like an assassin or something that blew up one of his rockets.
They should. This would be like a sort of interesting, world as seen through the eyes of Elon Musk, where he literally has to invent a flamethrower to burn all the shorts.
Yeah, this is what happens when you take this all way too seriously and you just want to get the shorts, and you end up getting yourself.
Yes, before long, he's going to take the boring company and bore into a volcano to set up his lair. That's my theory.
He probably has already done that, or built it on an asteroid or something secretly. That's why the burn is so high. So anyway, moving on. There were actually a couple of interesting studies that came out recently.
Okay.
One of them was in Nature Medicine, which talks about there's this calcium channel blocker, which is a hypertension drug. It's called verapamil, and it helped improve beta cell function in recently diagnosed adults with type 1 diabetes.
This is really interesting because the question is, how do you get there? This is a blood pressure medication for an autoimmune disease? Yeah, so this is crazy. So when I first saw this headline, me and Max were coming out with all sorts of funky explanations to get it there before reading the article. Maybe we should have read the article first. That's generally a good idea. And so I actually remembered that beta cells are actually excitable cells like nerve and muscle cells. So maybe they probably have some calcium channels that can be drugged with this thing. And it turns out that it actually changes some of the epitopes on the surface of the cell, right? So a particular epitope gets downregulated, and that's one of the ones that is identified by your immune system to kill these beta cells. So it's a very interesting article. Very interesting.
Well, I mean, in this case, it wasn't too late. They still had some residual function, and it was able to kind of keep it going a little bit longer than people who didn't.
Any residual function is good too.
Yeah, it really, really does help. I love these kinds of studies because, I mean, with this very, very cheap anti-hypertensive agent, you could potentially help people with a very, very expensive disease.
Yes.
There's probably lots of this.
I mean, it is a calcium channel blocker, which aren't the greatest, but
Yeah, but it was a nice small study. I'm sure no one will ever develop this into a real drug because there's no money in it.
Well, I've got a buccal formulation. Maybe I can try out.
That's great. We can do buccal.
Yeah, intranasal formulation of this.
Oh, yeah, the intranasals. I love the intranasals because so many drugs have been huge successes being intranasal formulations.
Well, I can think of one.
No, but seriously, I think there's only been maybe a handful of actual branded pharmaceuticals approved as nasal formulations.
And I think a good half of those are for problems with your nose, like Flonase.
Exactly. So I don't really get the whole intranasal thing. I mean, I guess you put it in your PowerPoint presentation and your business plan, and hey, we have a platform technology. We can turn everything into a nasal formulation.
Oh, I've got a fun one for people to. Well, it's not fun. It's actually hard to watch. But so there's an intranasal formulation of ketorolac, Sprix. That's on the market right now. You can buy this stuff. There's one big thing that prevented the wide uptake in Sprix, which is that it is insanely painful to administer to your nose. So go and watch some of these videos on YouTube of people using Sprix. And these are people which are like having like migraines. And so they actually think the pain of using this stuff is preferable. But you can't watch these videos without really, really feeling for these people.
Now, is it a spray or is it a neti pot?
It's a spray. So a neti formulation. This is interesting. It's called nasal lavage, Max.
Nasal lavage, yes. I remember there was a company that was developing amphotericin B intranasally for sinusitis, and you had to put in something like a milliliter of the stuff into your nose, which is a lot for your nose.
That's quite a lot. That's enough that like it gets stuck up there in a weird way, like when you go off the diving board and you're like, oh my gosh, this feels uncomfortable.
Yes, I can't think of anything more uncomfortable. But somehow, like, look, if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. I mean, look at Mannkind, for God's sakes. Like, they do have an interesting platform technology. They're Technolosphere, or Technosphere. But they chose insulin. You know, insulin, it's a growth factor. You don't really want that in your lungs. There's some theoretical lung cancer risk in there. I'm sure they could have done other things.
Yeah, a friend with type 1, I just wanted her impression. She was familiar with it, and she had heard about it. So they'd penetrated, at least people's knowledge. Her take was, I've got this disease that causes all variety of organ failure. Why would I potentially risk one other organ system that isn't at risk from diabetes, i.e. her lungs, by taking this drug? Makes a lot of sense.
Yes. And also, these patients are used to taking injections. They're used to kind of the timing, because it does change the timing of kind of your blood, like when you have to actually, inhale it versus, injecting, regular insulin. So it requires a change in routine, which, a lot of people don't like. And then you also get the shortness of breath, because a lot of the drug, it's not very hugely bioavailable in the lung, and you get like a lot of it just sitting there.
Exactly. And but it does avoid the squick factor. I mean, that's pretty much all it does.
The which factor?
Squick. Yeah, because it squicks you out. Ooh, a needle. Like, I don't want a needle.
Like a normal diabetic is probably testing themselves at least 3 times a day, every day. So that's 90 times a month. And that's just testing. So that every time it's a prick, and you got to squeeze the blood, put it in the little slot in the tester. You get desensitized to that.
Mm-hmm.
The amount of people who have enough needle phobia to say no to insulin when they're kind of dying of diabetes is very, very small.
Mm-hmm. I also one time calculated the number of Afrezza cartridges that you would need in a month. Basically, what I came to is that if you're going to be using this every day for a month at the high end, you're going to basically need a garbage bag filled with cartridges.
Yes.
So it's bad for the environment. That's what I'm saying. It's at least as bad as drinking straws.
Yeah, versus just dialing a unit number in a pen with a very, very small needle and using that. So yeah, this is why it has low single-digit millions worth of sales every quarter, and the company's essentially going bankrupt.
Yes, I like to use this case as a sort of screening out factor for job applicants.
Like, what do you think about Mannkind?
Yeah,
I
what do you
love
think
it.
about inhalable insulin? Because it tells you real quick a lot of detail about how people think about investing.
Anyone who is familiar with inhalable insulin will also remember the previous version of an inhalable insulin, which was developed by Inhale Therapeutics, now Nektar, which is a completely different company than it was originally. But they had a formulation. They partnered with Pfizer. Pfizer used their massive sales force to try to sell it. And again, I think in the first 9 months, they sold like maybe $7 million worth. While Mannkind at least has a decent device, because Al Mann, who developed it, was a medical device guy.
Yeah.
The device for the inhaled / Nektar version looked like a bong and was the size of a bong.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was, let's just say, inconvenient, to say the least.
It's hard to, you have to carry around your gym bag all the time.
And like, look, if you're a diabetic, I mean, you're used to you can do a lot of things on the sly.
Mm-hmm.
So you can test yourself at a dinner table with other people. You'll probably inject yourself, and they might not even notice or see, because like you can just inject yourself, I guess, in your stomach or test yourself in the finger, whatever. Everything's like under the table. Here, you'd have to like put this giant thing into your mouth.
Oh, you know what they should do? They should add a whistle to it. Like a train whistle every time you use it. That can be like advertising.
Yes.
Here comes the Alfreza train. Choo choo.
Oh, maybe they can have an audio recording so everyone knows you're using Alfreza. I'm using Alfreza. Please talk to your doctor if you have diabetes.
What else you got, Max?
Oh, yeah. Haven't talked about the study regarding thyroid cancer. So there was, in the New England Journal of Medicine, they just published an article about the overtreatment of small papillary thyroid tumors. So, there's an argument in a lot of cancers, like prostate cancer, et cetera, about overtreatment. A lot of these people might die of something else, et cetera. But this data was really striking that they showed in this article. So this is just for patients with small, which is less than 2 centimeter in diameter, localized papillary thyroid cancer.
So it's confirmed as cancer.
It's confirmed as cancer. So it actually is cancer.
Okay.
So
that's tricky too with thyroid cancer.
Yeah, but it's 2 centimeters. It's actually it's not that small if you actually think about how. I mean, because that's like a little less than an inch in diameter. That's considering.
That's kind of big.
Yeah, but anyway, so that's considered small, okay. I guess, in this world.
Well, in the world of goiters, everything's small.
If you look at the data, so they just compared a lobectomy, which is when they take off the half of the lobe that has the tumor, so you still have the other half of your thyroid, to just a total thyroidectomy. Mm-hmm. So basically in 20 years, irrespective of which procedure you have a 1% chance of death from thyroid cancer.
So there's no difference in outcomes from thyroid cancer?
There's no difference in outcome. As long as you're actually treating it with something, getting some surgical procedure, you're 99% fine. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's very little risk. And the Kaplan-Meier curves are pretty much overlapping, I would say even slightly in favor of lobectomy. Mm. But that's probably just noise. However, if you actually look at the number of, or the mix of surgeries, 80% of the surgeries are total thyroidectomies.
And why is that, Max? Do they give any sort of explanation?
Well, I think there's a desire of, just in case.
Just in case?
Just in case. And I mean...
That's like saying, like, oh, you've got hand cancer. We might as well take both hands. That logic doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, but that's what's happening.
It's a tumor. It's not... It's
a tumor's scary. Hearing you have cancer?
It's... Yes, it is very scary. Right, yes. But I feel like you should just cut out the scary part, leave the rest.
And then you have to take Synthroid for the rest of your life. Yeah. And, which... Okay, there's one thing, you're taking this drug, but you have to understand, if you ever have an interruption of supply for any reason, that's going to be a problem.
Well, I think probably what motivates this, and this is just me talking out of my ass yet again, is that I think a lot of doctors think, oh, well, you can live without a thyroid, better safe than sorry. They think, oh, you just treat this medically. I'm a surgeon. That's not my problem, right?
Yeah. So, surgeons, they're paid to cut.
Yep.
But also, I mean, I think the patients want this just to be safe. Like, just get it out of me. Oh, okay, I'll just take the Synthroid. That's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But that's, unfortunately, I mean, you these are such slow-growing cancers. You can just monitor yourself with the other lobe and see what happens. It's not that hard.
It's right on the surface too, right? So you get an ultrasound.
It can be in
right?
there. It can be inside.
Yeah, but the whole thyroid is not only so big, Max.
Yeah, no, I know.
And you can. This is you can palpate to find it, right? What other cancers can you just touch and find? Oh, I mean, I guess some like breast cancer,
Well,
prostate cancer. There's a few of them. Okay, I back up. There's a few of them you can just palpate and find, but this is one of them, right? You can't palpate for pancreatic cancer.
No.
And if you could, it probably wouldn't kill as many people.
Yeah, so I mean, there's definitely a lot of kind of, was it watchful waiting? I believe is the
Watchful
term?
waiting.
Watchful, yeah. You can just you're just seeing how things develop, and look, if you still have half of your thyroid, you're still making some thyroid hormone, and then you can live kind of. It's you're a lot more normal. But here, the data shows that the rate per 10,000 people for all thyroid surgeries has quintupled in the last 25 years.
Mm.
But it's all really these total thyroidectomies. I'm sure there's some reimbursement snag in there too. Like they get paid a lot more.
Yeah.
And then also, I think if you take both lobes, then you also run the risk of hurting your parathyroids. And, if you have like a parathyroid hormone issue, that's like a whole nother issue you have to deal with.
All right. Well, that's a good story.
Yeah. And so look, it's a very common issue. So if you are thinking about it, talking to your doctor, really go for the lobectomy unless they found like some major issues like that it's spread and it's metastasized or something. Because otherwise, if it's small, and you get that lobe, chances are you're fine.
Yeah, I think the middle road is the one often not taken in the delivery of medicine. I think,
or anything,
we should all take the middle path.
So we love talking about these unicorns, these like really highly valued companies.
Yes.
So there's one that we haven't mentioned on the show, but I've talked about with other people, just Samumed.
Mm-hmm.
So they just raised $438 million at a $12 billion private valuation.
Yes.
Mainly from non-healthcare specialists, like IKEA has a venture arm, and they got money from them somehow.
That's great.
Yeah, but they have these drugs, and they claim they're going to be so huge, but the data that they've shown, there are two most advanced drugs that they have. One is for osteoarthritis, which I guess is a common theme today, and another one is for hair loss.
See, that hair loss one, what did I say in the earlier podcast, Max? I said this lady mentioned the possibility of curing hair loss, and the crowd went crazy.
Yeah, but I think she actually had data that showed it worked or something.
And let's face facts. There's a lot of bald dudes, and maybe I'm gendering this too much because there's a lot of bald people out there, but there's a lot of bald dudes, particularly, with a lot of money. A lot of money laying around, or other people's money laying around too. The stress of playing the market makes all your hair fall out.
But $438 million, and like if you look at the osteoarthritis data, the drug doesn't do like almost anything. It's horrible. The p-values are like 0.5, 0.6 on a number of different measures. The hair loss data isn't actually good either, but they're able to get this money, and they have this whole other pipeline. I think Alzheimer's is in there too somewhere.
Oh God.
Yeah, so it's just like a whole collection.
It makes your brain grow.
Yes,
so much that it makes your hair come out.
Right. Why don't we just create bald therapeutics?
Bald therapeutics. See, every day the hair plug robot is looking better and better because that actually does fix your hair.
No.
It actually does.
No medieval torture methods as medical devices.
Oh, it's not medieval torture. It's future torture.
So it's just instead of like having a sweaty guy give you these plugs, you're having a clean robot, and that makes it the future?
Yes, it's a robot that injects hairs into your head.
Yeah, not pleasant. Anyway, yeah. Just one other thing that I like to complain about is the lack of corporate responsibility with managements. So If you remember Clovis about 3 years ago, they were caught exaggerating some of their response rates in their trials. So it was like they had a drug for cancer. The response rates were inflated by 20%. That's the absolute level. The relative level was much higher. So there's been an SEC investigation for a while. There was a Wells notice. So the company is just settled. The company has agreed to a settlement with the SEC. It has to be approved by a judge, but it'll be like a $20 million settlement. And then the CEO is going to have a separate settlement. But the company doesn't have to admit, and I don't think the CEO either, neither has to admit any wrongdoing. They don't admit or deny the allegations, but they're paying the money, basically. So I'm just wondering, so how are they actually being punished? I mean, they lied to investors. The stock went down by 2/3 after this was found out. So there's a lot of people who lost a lot of money. So there's lots of actual victims here. So Clovis is going to be spending $20 million of investor money.
Yes.
And then, I'm not even sure they're actually going to be spending investor money. They might just be spending insurance money. So, and I know that as an officer of the company, the CEO will be covered by, this director, officer and director insurance, which because he's not admitting any wrongdoing, probably will cover this.
Yeah.
So no one is actually being punished here at the company.
See, this is a good scam, man. You can just start a company, get liability insurance, and just do whatever the hell you want.
Yeah, I mean, within limits, but yeah, as long as, the SEC agrees to make it so you don't have to admit any wrongdoing, then yeah, you probably get it covered by your insurance, and then you're fine. And it's just amazing. There's these people who are constantly being caught for insider trading, and not even that much money necessarily. It can be $10,000, and they might have to go to prison, or they have massive fines, which because they're not really rich, they have to personally pay, and it's really hard, and they have to pay the criminal lawyer, and it's that's actually a major punishment. But there's no real victim in insider trading. Well, no, but you can't point them out.
Yes, there's no definable victim except everyone that was involved in this stock or could have been involved in this stock and something like that.
Well, no, but okay, look at Chip Scouron. So he was a portfolio manager at Front Point Partners.
Yep.
He was an MD, actually a nice guy. He ended up going to jail for several years because he got a tip from a doctor on, I believe it was the Human Genome Sciences data, and maybe it was Hep C or something like that. And so he sold his fund's stake in that in Human Genome the day before the results came out. So the results were coming out, and they were going to be negative anyway, and the stock would have plummeted anyway. So I'm not sure, I guess the people in the few hours before the market closed who traded HGSI, maybe he changed the price by a little bit, 50 cents or $1 or some small amount. So it's there's actually a very small number of actual victims, but he had to physically go to jail, not see his family, huge fines. And then Morgan Stanley clawed back some of his bonus because they actually owned Front Point. He got a super duper severe punishment for something with no discernible victims, while Clovis, where there's very clearly victims, the people who lost, maybe 2/3 of their investment in this company, and they're getting off scot-free.
It doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, the one thing you can say is just with insider trading is somebody comes off as a cheat.
Yeah, you're breaking the rules.
Yes, you broke the rules and you gotta go to the jail for that. But when somebody maybe says something that's not completely true, just society in general is a lot more forgiving. I mean, look at the president. I mean, holy crap. Yeah, it's oh, well, maybe he didn't know you maybe told the wrong thing, and you can't find the person that's really responsible because, somebody told somebody else something, and then it sort of took a life of its own. That's the sort of mental gymnastics that we go through,
I guess,
to forgive people for lying. Maybe every one of us has lied. Everyone's lied.
Yeah, but you're not supposed to, as
I know I'm not supposed
of a
to,
company.
But that's actually one of the things they ask you when you get a polygraph. They ask you, have you ever lied about something to someone in a position of authority? And the thing is, you always lie in that question. It sounds real serious, but everyone lies in that question and says no. So that's your control for a lie. during a polygraph, because literally everyone has done that. And so you think of that time like you lied to the store clerk because you stole some grapes when you were 6. You immediately go there and you're like, no, I didn't lie.
Did you steal grapes when you were 6?
Yes, I did.
Really? You're a grape stealer?
Yeah, I was like 6 and I saw the grapes just sitting there and I just like grabbed a handful.
They nice?
They were grapes. They're pretty good. Oh. But
Anyway,
I was 6.
so I'll if I ever have grapes, which I don't because I don't eat carbs, I'll have to keep a watchful eye on you while I'm watchfully waiting. Yeah, but anyway, going back to Clovis, what's really shocking to me is, so the CEO, he had previously sold Farmion for multi-billion dollars to Celgene.
Mm-hmm.
So many years ago. So, I mean, the guy doesn't have to work. Obviously, he has a certain fire in his belly to do this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
There really was no reason to lie. I mean, he's obviously well off. He's not like hungry. Like he could retire and never have to work again, and his grandkids probably never have to work again either. So why do this?
I don't know. I've been trying to figure that sort of thing out for a long time. I mean, I think it's just chasing away that constant fear of inadequacy, that your parents don't actually love you.
Okay.
That's my theory.
Okay.
So if you really want to raise a CEO as a child, just deny them affection.
Okay.
You heard it here first.
No, but it is funny, like what you were saying about, people kind of forgive liars. When you actually talk to Clovis investors, it's funny. They're like, oh yeah, that lie about 20%, that's old news. I mean, it's in the stock already. I mean, that drug's not even active anymore. Like, it was canceled. So it's like, oh, just because, it was 2 years ago, man. Ancient news that he lied. Why even bring it up?
No.
It's amazing. It doesn't matter. It's like, what if you're willing, if you can make me money today, I don't care what you did yesterday.
Yep. All right. Is there anything else, Max?
No, I think I am done.
I think I'm done too.
Okay, great. So everyone, please subscribe to Armchair Healthcare and also review us on iTunes. That would be very helpful.
And tell your friends.
Yes, definitely tell your friends.
All right.
Bye.
Talk to you next week. Our theme music is by Hazar.